Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Meeting Protocol Monthly Podcast, where we chat with some of the coolest people in the business and we bring you useful and relevant information about what is happening in the world of meeting planning. I am Dora Figueredo, the head of events and education at Meeting Protocol, as always, coming to you from my living room/office in New Jersey. Today's outstanding guest is Alia Aljunied, the executive director of event programming at Fortune Media Group. I think everybody who listens to this knows Fortune Media, so it's really exciting to have somebody really great on. She has experience in consulting, finance, museums, and media. Previously, Alia worked at the Wall Street Journal, where she led a programming team and programmed such events such as WSJ Tech Live, Market Watch Best News Ideas and Money Festival, WSJ Women in Forum, and WSJ Future of Everything Festival. There's so much. You've done so much. I'm so excited. She also has experience with companies such as GLG, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, Canyon Capital Advisors, and Anchorage Capital Group. So very well-rounded experience. Truly so impressive. I am thrilled to be able to learn from you today. And so tell us where you are joining us from today and the quick background of what got you into event planning.
Great. So I am joining from Brooklyn, New York, and I live and work out of New York, been here for 13 years, and I've been, you know, in events for maybe around the last 10 years. And it kind of all started very organically. I started my career originally as an executive assistant at a hedge fund, and that was because I was fresh out of school, and honestly, I just didn't know what I wanted to do right out of school for a while. For the first 9 months out of college, studied and I interned at a law firm and studied for my LSATs, all that. And I was like, wait, I really don't want to do this, and I don't want to take a job that will make me I might just continue to do it and then kind of get sucked into the wheel. Like I don't want whatever job I take to influence where I go. So I took what I thought was a very agnostic kind of job, but it ended up I ended up being in that job for 3.5 years while I was figuring out what the next step was. And I think it created and laid down the foundation of what it means to work in events, because I do think and see that a lot of executive assistant qualities is translatable to events, like in terms of project management, logistics, attention to detail. You're dealing with really intense individuals, to say the least. And, from an events perspective, maybe the people aren't so, quote unquote, intense always, but the companies you're dealing with are. So eventually, got into the world of museums and then went back to finance, but ultimately ended up in events because in my last finance job, I was doing a lot of events, um, and somehow got really lucky to get a job in events after because I had done so much and never looked back. I felt like it's something I enjoy and something it doesn't obviously it feels like work sometimes, but it's something that, I wake up and I'm excited to do on a daily basis.
Yeah. So many people that I know in events have come into events through being somebody's executive assistant, because that is very often I think so many executives don't realize how much work it is to plan an event, and they're like, oh, my assistant will do it. um,
Mm-hmm.
there's some really amazing experience, like you said, project management, etc. And so it is a really great introduction because you're dealing with lots of high level people, decision making for other people, and this project management. And so it is a very good segue if you are planning events for your CEO or whoever in your C-suite.
Yeah, and it's funny because when you're an EA, like an executive assistant, you also get not all EAs get these requests, but it is very much like you get those devil wears Prada requests where they're like, oh yeah, just do this. And they think it's like, no big deal.
Right.
Alia, I'll get Alia on it. And you're like, wait, what? And you just make it happen. So I think that if you're a really good executive assistant, you have the tenacity and also like the problem solver skills that really translates well to events, in my opinion, because you're like, oh, problem I've never dealt with. Let me just figure it out.
Right. That's true. That's very true. Well, as I said earlier, we're really lucky to have you, a pro with such impressive event content experience, especially with Fortune Live Media, which has influenced the industry tremendously with not just content and engaging speakers, but also as a leader in the use of technology to enhance the event experience. So let's start basic. Since some of our listeners may be young professionals and don't know all the different roles that contribute to the overall event industry, what does a director of event programming actually do? What does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, so a director of event content typically is a person that's leading the event content and event content strategy from all sides. So whether it be, we're looking at um, who we're thinking to book strategically. So we might have every event you have a list of your target speakers, but as the director of your department, you have to strategize on like you can't have the same speakers at every event, right? So like right now, for example, everyone wants to hear from OpenAI. Like from a business perspective, everyone wants to hear from OpenAI and Microsoft for obvious reasons because of their development of Chat GPT. But I can't have OpenAI and Microsoft at every event. And also, they're getting probably the most asked out of anyone in from a business perspective. So strategically looking at where those people would fit best, who from those companies should speak at XYZ um, event and why, and directing the team in that way. And then also ensuring, just like any manager, ensuring that the team delivers all of their projects on time or ahead. We work very closely across all teams. So whether it be with production or our marketing teams, even the sales teams, just to ensure that we're really bringing to life the best event possible.
And how does your role differ from other event roles? Like, are you doing small logistical things, or I mean, big logistical things like booking venues, or how separate is content from that?
So we are not doing most logistical things. So the production arm handles like booking the venue, etc. And then we are doing like from a logistical standpoint, we're booking the speakers, but then also, for example, at Fortune, I have a speaker logistics team. So I have a group of program directors, program managers that handle all of the content. I look at that team very much like the program director on each event is very much what I think of as the conductor on the content, really ensuring that, getting the invitations out, speaking to all the speaker teams, confirming, etc. And then once that speaker is confirmed, I have a logistics team and they handle all of the logistical information that we work with our production team on as well. But we have they handle all of it.
How big is your team?
Right now, I have about a team of 15. And I pause around that just because a majority of my team are freelancers. So I have to like at any given time, sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 15, sometimes it's 8. It really depends at the moment in time.
Based on the events that you're doing at that moment?
Yeah. Yeah. So we hire a lot of our team members on a project basis.
Okay, got it. And so zooming out a little bit, what kind of big goals do you have to hit at work?
So some of the biggest goals that I have to hit are, well, one goal I created for myself because just so you know, I'm fairly new to Fortune. So I'm 9 months into my role. And one of the goals that I really pushed is to ensure that we get the best names in the business. And that's a really big goal for me, and fortune, because right now in a post-pandemic world, it's a little bit harder. Like, all parts of events have been affected, including booking content. People are less inclined to fly to places, to take time to travel. They see the ease in doing virtual interviews. When you work in media, you don't pay speakers because it's against newsroom guidelines. So you can't really pay speakers to come and speak. On the rare occasion, you might pay for travel, but you aren't allowed to pay for speakers. So it's really, getting the best speakers for free in an earned media opportunity is really difficult, especially in this post-pandemic world.
It's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. And I'm sure so many of our listeners aren't aware. Like, I think that they just assume, oh, so and so person is speaking somewhere. They must have gotten 10 grand to be at that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
really interesting. Um, so do you think, I know that you've only been here for 9 months, obviously post in quotes pandemic. But is it, how much more difficult is it to get people to come to your events now? Like, do you feel like you have to have a much longer list of backup speakers to ask, or is it more of a matter of like getting the right person to ask the speaker and they're more likely to say yes?
I think it's a mix of both. It is definitely strategy. Um, but you do have a longer list of speakers to ask, just because time is finite. I also think, travel budgets have been cut. So, regardless of if we really want X speaker and they are the CEO, if it's in a really luxurious place, which many of our events are sometimes based on the current economic environment, a CEO might not want to be in that space because they've just done a big round of layoffs, or um, another hurdle that we have is the fact that because we haven't been traveling for so long. I know, like, last year was sort of the first year that people were really starting to travel. Now this year, and you'll see it in the news that business travel still isn't ramped up to 100%, but it's getting there. And because of that, it's even harder to book the C-suite, because that's who we book at Fortune, because now they're actually going out and visiting all the different campuses and offices that they haven't visited, or taking the meetings they weren't able to take in person during the pandemic. So you're competing with a lot of things, and you have to have a really compelling case on why they want to speak
Right. They have a
for
lot.
free.
Yeah, yeah, taking away their time, potentially flying a few hours to go somewhere. So yeah, that makes sense because they have a lot of really compelling business reasons to
Yes,
be there. But also some compelling business reasons to be there because it is still
exactly.
for their company and for their work. So I can see being in the C-suite, it might be hard to make those decisions.
Yeah.
Last summer, Laura Lynn Whitfield was a guest on this podcast, and she is an expert in experience design. Do you feel like that is part of your role as well?
1000%. I think that if content managers, directors, etc., are um, not collaborating with the experience designers and production team, you're not going to have a good event. I think, at least, like, it's just not. It takes two hands to clap, and I think the content is central to the experience. And if you can't map that properly, you don't get that right stickiness that each um, event per like company team is just like hoping for you to walk away with, right? Because they want you to engage with their event and walk away and sort of, one, never forget it, two, feel like they've gained something, and three, think, oh wow, that was really thoughtful, right? Like, from the moment you enter the event, what does it smell like? How do I feel? To the second you leave and you're like, oh, I learned so much. I met so many people. And I walked away with so many new contacts. Like that was an amazing experience. I mean, like from a fortune perspective, that's what we want our attendees to walk away with. Or it could be just like a really fun party.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great thing about being an event planner. You get to do a little bit of both. And I've said on the podcast before, so many for years, you know, some of my friends and family and even colleagues were like, "Oh, so basically you plan parties." And it's like, no, but no, I do a lot of. What are some of the more challenging aspects of your role, especially working for such an important company?
I think, like I said earlier, it's really hard to get anyone, even attendees, to an event these days. I think as meeting planners, you can see conversations around this new environment. People aren't willing to confirm super far in advance these days when it comes to attendees. Um, and even speakers, a lot of times, some want to plan in advance, and some just are like, I won't know until 6 weeks out or 2 months out, which still sounds like far in advance. But when you're trying to fill a room with a couple hundred or 1,000 people, you need to know who's going to speak, but also who's going to be there and who you're building this content for. Um, do you feel like that's what you've been hearing as well? Like that it's just been really hard to get speakers and attendees to come to things?
Yeah, for sure. That's a constant conversation over the last couple years where people are craving to be together, um, but not at a traditional event always. So it's
Yeah,
to keep them engaged and to find the right kind of activations, to get them to buy your tickets, or if it's free, to not just sign up but actually show up, because you know
yeah,
so many people will ditch an event when they haven't paid for it. So it's rough.
it is. Yeah, it's so rough. And also for events that are paid, it's like budgets have been cut. And I don't know if the budgets will ever get to be the same again, just because they have been cut for the last 3 years. And I do find that people are just more non-committal these days. Like even myself, I used to be, I think all event planners are somewhat, you know, schedule orientated people, but I am way less, or like I'll have plans and everything, but there are some weekends where I'm like, I don't want to plan anything and I won't say yes to certain things just because I'm like, I don't know how I'm gonna feel.
Yeah, same. And especially if you have a job that requires a lot of travel, if you're traveling to your own events, no matter how cool your personal plans sound, you're like, well, I've just been away working around the clock for like 8 or 9 or 10 days. I don't think I want to come. Like, I'm going to feel pretty depleted by the time I get back home, no matter how exciting, the event is with my friends or family.
Totally. That's 100%.
I recently, one of my friends, for Mother's Day, her husband gifted her a night away, at the beach. I'm in Jersey. She went down to shore. It was to Asbury Park. She hung out at a hotel by herself, for the evening. She like went to the bar, got herself a beer, maybe got a massage. I can't remember. But anyway, so she was gone for the whole weekend. And her husband, he was like, had a great time hanging out with our daughter. Their kid is very young. And he was like, but it was a lot, just me and my daughter, for 2.5 days. And then later on in the conversation, we were talking about my job, and he said, "What is it like when you go to big events?" And I was like, "It's kind of like just you and your daughter for 2.5 days." Except for me, it's like 7 or 8 days where I am with people constantly. I literally get no alone time until I get to my hotel room at like 9 o'clock or 9:30, where I have to catch up on emails anyway. And then I get a few hours of sleep, and then I still start over the next day again, because chances are I've probably planned a breakfast event with somebody and I have to be with people all over again starting at 8 or 9 the next day. So it's so much fun. It doesn't feel like work. I agree with what you said earlier, but it is a depleting job, sort of socially and mentally.
It really is. And it's funny because people for Fortune, we're in like I'm very grateful. We're always in like a wonderful place that you want to be in, like at the Ritz-Carlton or wherever, um, or the St. Regis, blah, blah, blah. But it's not like I get to enjoy anything at that venue. It's not like I'm going to the spa. Half the time I'm like lucky if I remember to eat, like that kind of thing. And so it's funny because people make comments and when you're in events, they're like, "Oh my God, you travel so much," and they think like travel is like so fancy, but it's not.
Right, right. Honestly, the only perk of all that travel is when you finally make status on an airline and you're like,
Exactly.
early, I can sit down sooner. That's really
That's totally, you're so right.
how do you keep yourself up to date on what's relevant and engaging, et cetera, for your audience?
So I read a lot. On a good day, I read or skim at least 12 or 15 newsletters from a ton of different outlets, and listen to radio news regularly all day, especially if I'm working from home, because I can just, pop that on. If not, when I'm in the office, I listen to NPR on the way in, sometimes during the day as well, but mostly on the way in, I listen to the morning news. And these outlets really run the gamut. So they run from culture, tech, policy, etc. Because it's important to know what's happening. I work for a media and news organization and I need to know what's happening and also who are the thought leaders. And sometimes reading from all these different various outlets helps me get into like a rabbit hole of what could be interesting from like a research perspective, or I can share these ideas with the various different program directors on the different events, like, hey, this person's seems really interesting, we should talk to their team if we haven't started already, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I'm gonna get down to our closing question here, since you've been so generous with your time. Thank you. Can you tell me about a super cool event that you have attended?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So this event goes down as one of the most memorable parties I've ever been to in my life. It was in LA, I want to say 2009. I, it was in a lot, like a production lot. I don't even remember. I want to say maybe it was Hornitos, the tequila brand. I don't even remember, but it was in a lot, and the lot was full of houses that were almost fully built. And so you would go and you were in this lot. They had the amazing DJs. Whoever was the like person who planned this was amazing. They had free food, and it was in this lot with an amazing DJ lineup. I think it ended with the headliner was like DJ Jazzy Jeff. Um, and the in the lot, all of the houses were different activations and different like food and etc. Needless to say, I can barely remember leaving the place. I mean, this was more than 10 years ago, but it was me and my friends who I went with still say it was hands down one of the best parties I've ever been to. But like from an activation standpoint, like the fact that I can still remember it
Mhm.
14 years later is crazy. That you like signed up, you parked in a lot, they took you on this bus, and you were transported into a completely new different world. So you're in this lot, and then every activation was in these different homes in the lot. You didn't feel like you were in LA, but you were in LA. It was amazing. You were transported. And I think a lot of events you want people to be transported to a different world.
That's very true. And I would love to hunt down whoever planned that and talk to that
Me
person.
too.
That sounds so fun. Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing, for being on, for giving us your time. For people who want to learn more about you and your work, where can they go for more information?
They can connect with me on LinkedIn. Yeah, or LinkedIn I think is best.
Great. And I will be linking to your LinkedIn profile in both our Spotify links, in our Spotify summary, as well as the email that comes out in July with your bio and information. So thank you, Alia, and thanks to our dear listeners and Meeting Protocol fans for checking out this episode. Don't forget to go to meetingprotocol.org, where you can sign up for our newsletter that includes links to new podcasts, a CMP tip of the month, and tons of resources for all things related to meeting professionals and the CMP.